again, this is the discussion of ideas, recommendations, not decisions. It is simply for you to be able to speak in the area that you represent as a global representation. So for example, Ms. Kirby, she is not only representing Jones High School, she is representing principals as a whole. So feel free to reach out to your constituents of representation as we move along. And if you did that prior, that was excellent. As we go through these agenda items, we are going to defer to FHSAA staff to get an idea of where these particular conversations are, to then be able to discuss and have conversation with staff members and potentially provide recommendations that may come out of this task force. So again, please speak freely, speak openly. And again, to those in the public, that this is a recommending committee, not a governing committee. So I just want to kind of jump off on the items. Our fall sports season start date, Mr. Tomlin alluded to what is published on the calendar of July 27th, but I would, if someone from the FHSAA staff could address if that is the intended plan, is there any consideration for changing that, and then to open it up for discussion.
Well, you've already heard me announce that we are planning on a fall season as is already posted. So our interest right now is hearing what other constituents around the state may have to contribute about that in this conversation today.
Okay, so anyone who would like to go first? You have Mr. Gillis.
So being here in the South Florida area, which has probably been hit a little bit harder than most other areas, and we are still trying to get in the mode of it, just going through a phase one of conditioning and workouts here for the summer. It seems that it is going to be very difficult for us to begin on the start date. And so we are actually looking to find out and would like some recommendations on at least examining these initial start dates as we move forward.
Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, I just want to echo Mr. Gillis's sentiment because here in Miami-Dade, just as in Broward and Palm Beach, we're still not even able to get into our buildings yet. So we would very much look to see what recommendations might come across here, because it looks very unlikely that we'll be able to start on time.
Okay, Ms. Romero.
Echoing the same comments that they've made. We actually had an athletic directors meeting canceled today because our proposed start date of July 6th, just to begin small groups of 8 and less for conditioning, has been canceled. So we haven't even been given a directive as to when we can even begin meeting with kids. So we're in that same situation that it's possible that we won't even begin until late July, just even being able to meet with kids.
Coach Johnson.
Yes, our area is way different, of course, and many of our schools in our area are already rolling and doing well and not having any problems. I respect the fact that other parts of the state are dealing with something different than we are. So there's some mutual respect there, but at the same time, we are in an area that's not as affected as bad. And, one thing that comes to mind, has there been any precedent set by the FHSAA in years past when a hurricane hits, say, we're supposed to start July 27th and a storm hits? Have we shut the rest of the state down until that area was able to start back?
Not to my knowledge, Coach, and different things like this happen all around the state. Certainly your area suffered through a tragic hurricane and storm just last year. And no, we did not stop the rest of the state until that particular area was recovered.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Rosenbaum.
But this is a pandemic. This is not a hurricane. It affects the whole state. So we got to compare. You can't compare those two.
I was answering the question.
Okay.
So first of all, I want to apologize if you hear chainsaws in the background. I am surrounded by tree trimmers on both sides of my house that did not know they would be here the last 2 days. So if you hear that, I'm sorry. But with some of these concerns, Mr. Tomlin, if we could have a dialogue from staff members, what kinds of considerations are being discussed with these concerns that you're hearing?
I'm going to ask that you be a little more specific. I can only entertain the fact that you're probably looking at a variety of other things that might be on this list and things that are being considered. So be a little more specific for me. I certainly, our staff is respective of the different areas of our state. We recognize the diversity of our great state, and we understand that things are going to be a little different. Right now, with the knowledge that we have, we are going to go forward with the plan that our governor is supporting and leading us on. Other than that, I'm not sure exactly how specific you want me to get at this moment in time.
Well, I guess my question, and anyone else can chime in, is from what I'm understanding and the responses that I've heard from staff is there really is no consideration to changing the start date. It is, we're going to start at this time. Now, whether those other parts of the state start at that time or not is to be determined.
That is correct. I used the word optimism several times in the beginning, and following in the governor's. It's his intention that we start school at the same time, however that may be operated. And we intend to, at this moment in time, we intend to start things as is calendarized already. That could change this afternoon at 4 o'clock, and that could change this afternoon or tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. We know that's the biggest issue that we have. Just yesterday, I was on the telephone with Senator Rubio's legislative aide, and he asked me the question, what keeps you up at night? And I said, it's the unknown, not knowing exactly what the case may be and what tomorrow may bring.
And I certainly respect that things change on an hourly basis. I guess my question of hearing that and hearing some of the concerns that other members on the task force have brought forth in the southern part of the state, and as Coach Johnson in the Panhandle, yes, it's very different, but what is being addressed for the competitive equity of the Panhandle, for example, that can resume, and South Florida that cannot resume at this time? Mr. Tomlin, that was a question.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to get Chancellor Oliva on the phone. And Nadia, if you could reach out to Chancellor Oliva, he's having some difficulty. And I'm sorry that I was trying to do something else. Or multitasking, not very good.
Okay.
Please try again.
Yes, that's okay. I was asking based on the concerns that, such as in the Panhandle, they can go. They're good to go, but down in South Florida, they're what it appears to be nowhere near ready to go. So I was asking, how is it being addressed with the competitive equity across the state if you've got teams, or not teams, but areas ready to go and other areas that are at a standstill?
Well, I think we have to wait and see exactly what happens in South Florida. Again, we're I think bordering on some of the other issues that you have below us, below on the list of items. If it gets to the number of games a team could play, or the number of competitions an individual student could participate in, certainly we would work with whatever district that is, whatever team that is, whatever coach or player that is, and make appropriate adjustments. Because again, one of the first things I said, these are extraordinary times, and we're going to go to extraordinary measures to assist those folks.
Okay. Mr. Ochoa?
I think more so than an equitability issue, it becomes a safety issue. Because we're dealing with student athletes now that have been out and away from our building since March. And depending on when it is that we're able to even start phase one down here, it's a matter of safety, more so than equitability. Because equitability, I think, goes out the window with the fact that even though the public sector down here is locked out, there are many private schools, all right, and charter schools that run by their own rules and regulations and are already in the same mode that they're in the Panhandle area. now here. So it's not so much about equitability as it is about safety.
Ms. Romero?
And I echo what he said. That's a discussion that we've had here in Palm Beach County in great detail because right now the feedback that we're receiving is that we wouldn't be ready to start games if we're fortunate enough until after Labor Day, just because they're not looking to allow us to access campuses at all until at least possibly the end of July. And that's just to access the campuses. That's not to get ready for conditioning or anything fall sport related. That's the latest that we've received. So we had talked about a start date for safety reasons to get the kids acclimated and ready would probably be a target date of after Labor Day, which would of course adjust our game schedule.
Okay, we'll go to Coach Johnson and then Mr. Scarpino.
Yes, this is a question for Mr. George. If it hadn't precedent been set, like for instance, we didn't have lights in our field house and there were kids eating out of cans and stuff like that, and we missed 2 weeks of practice, and you gave teams in our area the option to not play or to play, and then you waived the minimum game deal and didn't hold it against us, but basically left it in each district's hands as to play or not play for safety.
That is correct, sir. We made
Is
those.
that the precedent we've set in the past?
That is correct. That's what we have done. We do that all over the state, not just in that particular area, but we make exceptions around the state. Yes, sir.
Mr. Scarpino?
Yes, just out of curiosity, wouldn't that make sense to have a plan B in regards to start dates, given that this is a COVID-19 and travel and everything else along those lines are affected as well?
I need someone to repeat that question for me because that was my was breaking up. Ms. Otero, can you help me with that?
He was asking about a plan B of an alternate start date due to, was it rising numbers you had said, or just outbreaks across that weren't expected?
Yes, correct. I mean, outbreaks that may not have been expected. There's a difference, I do agree, between the pandemic and what's happened up in the panhandle. And I do understand Mr. Johnson's statements up there, but it does make sense to have a plan B as far as alternative start date given if we know additional knowledge as we're moving forward.
The best answer that I can give you right now is we do not have a published plan B. We've had multiple discussions in a variety of ways that we can address issues, whether it be to address an issue with a whole section of the state, whether it be to address an issue with an entire county or an entire school, whatever it might be. And we have had many discussions about that and are prepared to address those issues as they come upon us.
Are there any recommendations out of this first item from the task force that would want to be presented to the FHSAA? I think Mr. Scarpino kind of alluded to a recommendation of a plan B. Certainly, we may get into plan XYZ and then A, B, A, C, A, D by the time this rolls around, but knowing that there is a plan B certainly is a fallback. So if there are no other, yes, Mr. Rosenbaum.
Has there been any talks about actually pushing the date back to figure out what this is going to do? Right now, obviously, there's more teenagers going on that we're opening our campuses. There's more and more cases now of our kids actually getting it. So is there any talk about pushing the season back until we get a hold of what's going on out there? Just a question.
Okay, we recognize that question and I appreciate that. I want to fall back on what our governor has said. Our governor has said, and you can roll your head if you want to, but our governor said we're going to start schools on time, and it's up to local decisions to make local policymakers to make those decisions. I think it's very inappropriate for us to do something that is contrary to what our governor is saying to do. And I feel very strongly about that. And I will say this also in reference to adjusting any kind of a schedule that might impact the fall. that also impacts the winter, which in turn impacts the spring, which changes a lot of things. And so that's why we're very comfortable in staying exactly where we are right now.